Okay, so welcome to our webinar, Explaining Your Organization's Finances to Non-Financial Stakeholders, presented by JV Kosovo. But first, a few words about SCORE Westchester. Go to the next slide. Our goal is to foster small business through free mentoring and education. We serve our small business community by providing confidential business mentoring, webinars and workshops, and extensive online educational resources. Our clients are startups to established businesses. We have 50+ volunteers with a variety of business backgrounds to draw on. You can reach us at 914-267-6570 at westchesterscore.org, or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Next slide, please. So a little housekeeping before we begin. Everybody will be muted during the presentation. As we go, please submit your questions and comments using the Q&A button, not the chat button. We will leave time at the end of the webinar to review and answer the questions that you have asked. Next, please. Okay, today's webinar, we're going to cover small businesses and nonprofit organizations often find themselves in a position of having to explain complex financial information to stakeholders who are not or do not have a financial background. This seminar will show you how to distill and communicate the financial condition of your organization in an understandable way that these stakeholders while maintaining transparency. We're going to cover knowing your audience, defining your objective, developing your narrative, creating your content, and making your presentation. Next, please. Our presenter is JV Kosovo, the Director Emeritus of the New York Botanical Garden. He recently retired after serving the organization for 22 years in a variety of capacities, including CFO and CFO. He had a 45-year career in financial and administrative positions primarily at nonprofit businesses. Currently, he divides his time between being a SCORE Westchester mentor and volunteering at local cultural organizations. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to JV. Take it away.
Thanks for the introduction, Art, and welcome to all of you. This is the first webinar I've done for SCORE, and when I was asked to do so, I thought immediately about this subject of explaining finances to non-financial stakeholders. I did so because over my career, I have witnessed many occasions when financial professionals were so convinced they had to be comprehensive and dense in their reporting that they lost their audiences. I did it myself many times early in my career before I realized that dense numbers and overwhelming data do not convey meaningful information to many people. In fact, they often obscure meaning. Financial information is not reporting numbers for numbers' sake. It is about using the numbers to reveal the essence of your financial condition. So let's talk about ways we can make complicated financial information more digestible. Who this seminar is for. This seminar is intended for small business owners and operators and leaders of small nonprofit organizations who must communicate the financial condition of their enterprises to stakeholders who may not have financial expertise. And a disclaimer, I'm neither a lawyer nor an accountant or CPA, and I do not provide advice in those areas. If you're seeking legal or accounting advice, please consult with an appropriate professional. What we will cover. We will discuss developing non-audited financial reports for the layperson. We will not go into detail about financial statements that would be reviewed by auditors or provided to creditors or government agencies. For example, we don't delve into the mysteries of accrual accounting, balance sheets, or cash flow statements. We are focusing on how to make simple, direct financial reports to lay people. A word about financial statements. If you are a small for-profit business, you may not be required to produce financial statements or be audited unless, for instance, a creditor or investor requires it. Check with your legal and accounting professionals. If you are a small nonprofit, you are required to submit a financial statement to the New York State Charities Bureau. But if your annual gross revenues are less than $250,000, it does not need to be audited or reviewed by a CPA. Again, check with your legal and accounting professionals. In either case, you may have stockholders who are financial professionals and will want to see your formal financial statements. If you are not a financial professional yourself and do not have one on staff, you should consider having your accountant review the statements with these stakeholders. A word about transparency. I often get the impression that people think that transparency means that you have to divulge any and all aspects of your activities, often to levels of minutia that would put anyone to sleep. But truly, what are your obligations related to transparency? First, you should be clear about information that is factual versus information that results from making a judgment. For example, after paying this month's bills, we have $10,000 in the bank. That's a fact. Based upon expense projections, $10,000 will cover bills for the next 2 months. That is a judgment. Second, you have an obligation to be truthful about factual information and disclose how you arrived at your judgments. What were the conditions and assumptions that led you to make a particular judgment? What drove your decision-making? An example, the judgment was based upon the budget and known fixed expenses. Third, transparency is not about providing every bit of data. Rather, transparency is about helping your audience understand your financial condition and the factors that are affecting it. An argument could be made that to overwhelm your audience with data in the service to transparency is actually a tactic to obscure the facts. Better to be simple, direct, and report the essential data, not all of the data. Assumptions for our discussion. We're going to assume that you have an annual cash budget. That is, a projection for income and expenses prepared on a cash basis versus an accrual basis. A cash budget identifies how much income you plan or expect to earn this year and how much you will actually have to spend out of pocket to run your enterprise. An accrual budget would take into account non-cash items, such as depreciation, unrealized gains and losses on investments, etc. Better to leave that to the accountants and your formal financial statements. Now, let's assume you have to make a financial presentation to your stakeholders. How do you approach it? There are 5 steps to consider: knowing your audience, defining your objective, developing your narrative, creating your form and content, and making your presentation. Step 1, know your audience. Who are they? What do they care about? What are their concerns about your enterprise? To the degree you can, you should find out as much as possible prior to developing your report. If you know of concerns or issues, be sure to address them. It's been my experience that you will likely have a mix of personalities and levels of expertise in your audience, but for the most part, they all will want you to cut to the chase and not drown them in minutia. They want answers to the basic questions. Are we making money? Can we cover expenses? Is there money left over after expenses? Do we have a budget? How are we doing against it? Do we have debt? Do we have savings? What are the stresses on the enterprise? What are our plans for dealing with them? And what are our short and long-term outlooks? Financial statements can answer some of these questions, but only for a specific moment in time, generally at year end. But the answers to these questions are often moving targets that must be dealt with continually throughout the year. Otherwise, year end might not look so good. Step 2, define your objective. Every financial report should have an objective. What do you need your stakeholders to know? What help do you need from them? What potential problems are you trying to avert? For example, you may need to hire a new staff member. You may need to take out a loan to buy equipment. Perhaps a local government grant has not been renewed and you have a hole in your income projections. In essence, by the end of your presentation, what do you hope to accomplish? In any event, you're going to have to be convincing. So what is the story you're going to tell to make your point and satisfy your objective? Now, just for a moment, imagine yourself walking to lunch with a few of your stakeholders, and they ask, so how are things going? You probably wouldn't hand them a sheet of numbers and expect them to plow through them while they are walking. It's distracting and it's difficult to focus. You would tell them about the challenges you're facing, your successes, and any surprises you may have had to deal with. and you would tell them about your ideas for responding to these situations. In short, you would tell them your story. You would give them the sheet of numbers, but not until they understood your challenges and plans. Think of a financial report not as a monologue supported by spreadsheets, but rather a conversation, two colleagues just talking. Step 3, develop your narrative. The narrative is the substance of your report. Generally, it addresses 6 questions. What is the current state of your enterprise? What forces are impacting revenue? What forces are impacting expenses? What is the outlook for your enterprise? What remedial actions are you taking? Given your actions, what are your new projections? Each of these items would be a slide in a PowerPoint or a set of bullet points in your report. So let's go through these. First, current conditions. What are the forces currently at play that are affecting your business? For example, the residual effects of the pandemic. Maybe it's rising inflation, perhaps government regulation. This information lays out your challenges and sets the table for the rest of your report. 2, impact on revenue. How is your revenue budget affected by these forces? In our example, online sales are up, but on-site sales are down. Interest earnings are up, but not enough to offset lower on-site revenue. Are you running ahead of budget or falling behind? Impact on expenses. How is your expense budget affected? Perhaps inflation is causing the cost of virtually every type of supply and service to be rising. Perhaps it's difficult to hire staff, which lowers expenses in the short term, but when a hire is made, wages are greater than expected. Again, compared to budget, are you over or underspending? So you have explained the challenges you face and the forces at play and how they impact revenue and expenses. Now you need to tell your audience what that means for your enterprise going forward. That is, you need to make your summary outlook. Based upon current conditions, what is the outlook for your enterprise? An example summary statement might look like this. We are currently operating in the red, and unless on-site traffic and sales can be increased and/or expenses contained, we will lose money for the year. And at the current rate of loss, our financial reserves will be exhausted before year end. This summary describes an unfavorable condition and will require you to lay out remedial actions that you will take. If the reverse were true, you would propose what to do under the favorable conditions: save money, invest in equipment, hire staff. You will propose whatever is best for your enterprise. 5, remedial actions. Define a plan for addressing your challenges. It's surprising to me how often an organization's leader will lay out a problem and then not propose a solution or at least options. It is incumbent upon you to raise issues and propose solutions. In our example, what remedial actions can you take to improve the outlook? Let's say, for instance, on the revenue side, launch a campaign offering special pricing and benefits to on-site customers. On the expense side, perhaps we freeze ordering supplies until stocks are drawn down and maybe freeze hiring staff. This is where you would present what you need to address your challenges and how your proposal would make a difference. For example, you could propose to hire a part-time staff member to stay open later to increase on-site sales. Or maybe you need to invest in new inventory control software to minimize the cost of goods sold. Make a case for what you need. Finally, projections. Given your remedial actions, what is your revised projection? Explain how your actions and proposals will improve your situation. For example, the sales campaign should result in additional revenue, but at lower margins. With tighter control over expenses, we should at least break even, although we may have to use some or all of our financial reserves. We will report regularly on our progress. So now you have the meat of your report. You've explained current conditions, impacts on revenue, impacts on expenses, the summary outlook, remedial actions, and new projections. So what will your report look like? Step 4, Create your form and content. When you create your presentation, simpler is better. Here are some things to consider. First, presentation style. Whatever method you use to create your presentation, whether it's PowerPoint or Word, keep your prose terse and make liberal use of bullet points. Be direct in your language. Second, organize your numbers. Income and expense items should not appear to be random lists. Organize them according to how you measure your success. I regularly see income statements and budget reports where revenue and expenses seem to be laundry lists of random items. For example, you may tell your audience that you measure success according to revenue goals you set for each distribution channel, say online sales, on-site sales, and standing orders. But then you present an income statement organized by sales of product types, paper, pens, toner, etc. Your message gets lost. How is the reader meant to see how much each distribution channel is contributing to your annual revenue if your income statement is organized by product type? Budget versus current versus year-end projection. Provide a status of how you are tracking the budget. I often hear financial reports that are nothing more than stating the balance of an organization's bank account. We have $10,000 in the bank. Okay, so what does that mean? Is that good or bad? Are there claims against that cash? Do we need to? Cash in the is a meaningless number except in relation to the budget. We have $10,000 in the bank. We will need $5,000 to make our budget, but the other $5,000 is free and clear. 4, nested levels of detail. If your income and expense items are lengthy or complex, use a summary in your presentation and attach a detailed schedule as an appendix. The summary will be more digestible. But if someone wants more information, you can always refer to the appendix. I was at a board meeting in the local cultural institution just this past weekend, and the CFO reported on funds raised against goal. She did it beautifully with a simple, highly summarized chart. She showed total funds raised for operating purposes, capital projects, and endowment, and compared them to goals. Just a few numbers for her board to digest. When someone did ask for more information on capital projects, she had a backup chart ready that showed each project included in the summary. 5, visuals are always good. If photos or other imagery is helpful to illustrate a condition, use them. For instance, you may have a problem with a storefront that needs to be upgraded. Photos would do a good job in making your case. Charts and graphs are often useful in making a point, but keep them very simple and be careful not to overuse them. And I would always avoid using emojis and other distracting graphics. Step 5, make your presentation. As a leader of your enterprise, it is incumbent upon you to instill confidence in your stakeholders. That can only happen if you project confidence, which comes from being prepared. Know your material inside and out. It will give you confidence, which will be felt by the audience. Also, develop possible questions that may be raised and have ready answers. Speak extemporaneously. Try not to read from a script. The point here is to be engaged and not have your head buried in a piece of paper. You can certainly write a script for yourself, but if you're like most people, you will write in a manner more formal than when you speak. So read your script to yourself out loud, and you will find yourself naturally streamlining your language. For example, using contractions or using phrases rather than full sentences. When you do so, stop and change your script. After a few run-throughs, your script will start to sound more conversational. Read your script many times, and you may not need it at all. I have to confess, I wrote a script for today's webinar. Since this is the first time I've spoken in front of people in almost 2 years, I needed a security blanket. But you will have to be the judge about whether or not I was successful in following my own advice. 4, be direct and avoid generalizing about conditions or your actions. I often hear the organization's leadership say, we're working hard and watching every penny. That is close to a meaningless statement. The audience assumes you are doing your job. Tell them something specific you are doing. We are reevaluating our stock requirements each month to keep inventory at a minimum. Finally, practice your presentation. Practice, practice, practice. Remember, you're only as credible as the confidence you project. You must believe what you're saying for others to believe it. One final postscript. If you're having to make a difficult presentation to a group of people, remember that group dynamics are different than one-on-one conversations. You might be wise to socialize your presentation with key stakeholders individually before making the presentation in a group setting. You may discover pushback that you can deal with privately in advance. You may also rally support that could come in handy at the group meeting. In any event, you will want to reduce the possibility of an unwanted surprise. Good luck to you all.
Thanks, JB. What's the last slide? Forget. Is there one more slide?
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Questions.
Let's open it up to questions. But first, I wanted to say one thing. The thing that my big takeaway from this is sharing your story. I mean, I'm a big one. I love numbers and spreadsheets, but I think boiling it down to a story, JB, is a really great concept. And I think the thing that I would say to it, and I also love the idea of having a solution and being able to share your story and having a solution, I think leads to a conversation that can help you, that can bring you to a new place with your small business, especially when you're out there, with a stakeholder that is giving you money or loaning you money or is trying to help you move along. I thought those are really, really compelling point.
Well, no matter who you're talking to, whether it's a bank officer or a family member or a staff member, you have to make a personal connection. And you do that by telling a story as opposed to just putting a bunch of numbers in front of somebody. You've got to explain them. You've got to show how they impact people personally. And
yeah.
Right.
I think that's really great. I think that, and when you have that information and you're going before a bank or you're going before an investor, you're just going to be more comfortable. It's easier to have a discussion like that than it is to lay out, page after page of a spreadsheet. Having the backup is always critical, but I do think that a compelling story is a big aid. Are there any questions out there from anybody? Anybody want to ask anything at this point? Nothing yet? All right. So, I thank JB, thank you very much for this presentation. Sure. I thought it was very, very useful. And I want to remind everybody that they'll be receiving a link, in their email to this presentation so they can go back and review it again. There's one more slide, I think, right? Yeah. And thank you to the SBA for funding us. And thank you to everybody for attending today's webinar. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to SCORE, westchesterscore.org, and watch for the link in your inbox. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.